great to have Coca-Cola on board as sustainability partners. And as you can see, over the years, their belief in the value that Model UN can add to their feedback loop from a sustainability standpoint on the initiatives that they lead, keep them coming back year on year. Today, without any further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce to you formally our first speaker, Mr. Chandrasekhar Radhakrishnan. He has been appointed to the position of Vice President, Strategy and Insights, Coca-Cola India and Southwest Asia. Mr. Chandrasekhar will take charge of strategic initiatives for the company to accelerate the pace of innovation and assess opportunities to offer a much broader and deeper portfolio of beverages for the consumers. With a career spanning 2 decades, Mr. Chandrasekhar comes with a combination of international and domestic experience. He joins Coca-Cola India from Nestle, where he was responsible for leading a worldwide initiative to optimize marketing efficiencies. As the head of consumer communication and e-commerce, he effectively embedded brand building capabilities in the organization, drove creative excellence in brand communication via strong internal and external partnerships, laid a strong foundation in building digital and e-commerce competencies, and played a key role in establishing consumer engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome, with warm applause, Mr. Chandrasekhar Radhakrishnan. Sir, I invite you to please take the stage.
Good evening. Still polite, but I'll take it. My name is Chandrasekhar Radhakrishnan. I know it's a little too long. You can call me Chandru, or you can call me by any other name, then you'll have to do it in private. Yeah. Who needs leadership skills? So I'm going to come down. Who needs leadership skills? I see a lot of hands going up. Who needs leadership skills? Who doesn't need leadership skills? Yeah, there are a couple of hands going up. Very good. All of us do. Who needs leadership skills? All of us do. We don't need authority or a title to be a leader. And all leaders are not superhumans who are commanding their forces, or corporate bigwigs who are standing and directing their teams. You don't need to actually lead groups, teams to be a leader or express these leadership characteristics. Why? Because we all have a fundamental responsibility and accountability to contribute to the communities whom we belong to the society at large, and the world where we have been born to. Don't we all want to make the world a little better place before we leave? I can't hear you guys. Okay. So, you don't need an authority or a title to be a leader. Everyone can exhibit leadership characteristics. And that's the most critical thing. So what I'm going to do now is share with you 3 lessons. How many? 3. Just 3 lessons, which I've learned from my life, my experiences. Some I have been inspired by different people who are big leaders, but I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to tell you the lessons that I've learned, which the school of life has taught me. And these are all leadership lessons. The first lesson is leadership is about personal values. You know what personal values are? Personal values are values which have been influenced by people and experiences that we come across with. People who you have been brought up with, and experiences that you have encountered throughout your lives. People who you have been brought up with, and people whom you collaborate with right now. So these personal values that you develop are extraordinarily important. As a little boy, I was inspired by my dad. My dad came from a very small village in Tamil Nadu. How many of you know the state called Tamil Nadu? How many of you know my dad? He came from a very small village. His dad, my grandfather, had depleted all his wealth. He had nothing. My dad actually had to leave the village and come into the city to make a living. And when he came into the city, he had to earn a living, not just for himself, but for his long list of brothers and sisters. It wasn't an easy task. His leadership skills were all at stake. I have seen him suffer. I've seen him struggle. But he had to keep fighting because he had no other choice. I've seen him actually build a business along with his brothers with absolutely no money, no PE investments like the startups of today. He built it along with his brothers on relationships and partnerships. He taught me the centrality of integrity. You know what integrity is? He used to tell me, watch what you're doing when nobody else is looking at you. And that's what integrity is all about. He taught me the centrality of integrity again and again. He talked about family values. He told me that family is not about blood relatives. Family is much more than that. Family is people that you work with, you collaborate with, and possibly the communities that you belong to. Passion, energy, integrity, family values, all are my personal values which come from him. You have to think what comes to you. What are the people who have influenced you and inspired you, and what kind of values come to you? Now with these values, as a leader, you cannot have these core values within yourself. You'll have to walk that talk. Let me give you an example. When I was a marketing manager at Britannia, which was my first job, and I had this team, I did a consumer promotion on a cream biscuit portfolio. Do you people know about Britannia? Britannia has biscuits, and it has cream biscuits as well. These cream biscuits talk to kids, and kids consume a lot of cream biscuits. So at that point of time, the consumer promotion was to give a Disney toy with every cream biscuit. We thought about it for a long time, and I actually did that promotion. It was a disaster. It didn't work at all. It actually put us back by possibly ages. We lost a lot of money. The team was devastated. But the one thing which was my personal value and which I could transmit to the team was to never give up. Within 3 months, we actually came back with a completely different consumer promotion, which was a cream biscuit and a Tom and Jerry comic book. I don't think most of you guys would have been born during that time. But a Tom and Jerry comic book was not available outside. And it was a big, big hit. It actually gave confidence back to the team that whatever they are doing is working. Let me give you a different example of a leader whom we all look up to and are inspired by. How many of you do not know Steve Jobs? I see a couple of hands. You can Google it, on your iPhone. Steve Jobs, focus was ingrained in his personality. Focus was so ingrained in his personality that he was so relentless about negating things which were actually distractions. And his focus as a value was sharpened during his Zen training, which was during his childhood. Now for family members and colleagues, it was a little exasperating because they could never make him actually attend to issues which were not his focus areas, like legal matters, medical diagnosis, many other matters which actually could be important. But he had laser-like focus on things that he wanted to. He actually gave a cold stare. He never used to come back into those areas till the point he had completed his focus areas. That was his value. Let me give you 2 examples of how he actually walked the talk on focus. When he actually took over Apple, he used to take the top 100 employees and top 100 employees for a retreat. And when he took the top 100 employees for a retreat, he used to have a whiteboard with a marker. Have you guys experienced somebody standing with a whiteboard and a marker? It actually gives control to the person who's actually writing on the whiteboard. Complete control. And that's how he was. He took complete control. Now, he had to get top 10 initiatives or points which Apple should do next. Now you can think about the commotion. You can think about how debates, discussions, and how people were jockeying around to get onto that board. People used to debate a lot. And then he used to write, after a lot of time, debates, discussions, those 10 top areas that Apple had to do next. And you know what he used to do? Anybody wants to make a guess? He used to strike off the bottom 7 and he used to say the top 3, and this is what we can do as Apple. That was focus. From his personal value of focus, it got transmitted into behavior and action that he was able to demonstrate. How many of you know Larry Page? Oh, now you can't Google him if you guys don't know. Yeah, he is the co-founder for Google. Okay, so during the last miles of Steve Jobs, Larry Page actually met Steve Jobs. And he asked him for advice. Though he was a competitor in some sense, Steve actually gave him advice. He said 2 things. 1, think about what Google would be when it grows up. And 2, focus on very few areas. When Larry actually went back to his team, he said, we will focus on only 2 areas. One was Android, another was Google+. And let us make it as beautiful as Jobs would have made it. His focus got transmitted to another leader who was possibly a competitor as well. There was another very, very key value of Steve Jobs. There was simplicity. Do you guys know that Steve Jobs was a college dropout? Yeah. And you know what he did when he was a college dropout? He worked with Atari games. Have you guys played Atari games? Have you seen an Atari game machine? Oh, I can see some hands. Oh, have you played the Star Trek game there? Oh, Atari is a wonderful game. It has no instruction manual. It's got nothing. It's got just 2 instructions. And if you guys are Star Trek freaks, you would see even a stoned freshman and can actually go and play that game because it had simple 2 instructions. 1, insert a coin. 2nd was avoid Klingsman. That's it. It was that simple. You have to put the coin and go. It keeps going on. And that was the Atari game of Star Trek. It was that simple. And that was inspiration to Steve. When he actually went back into Apple, the first marketing brochure read, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And that was the value that Steve Jobs actually brought in through his marketing brochure. And you guys would all agree that when actually it comes to an Apple computer or a machine, it has much simpler navigational features and non-intrusive features, much more simple than any other competitor offers. Focus and simplicity were his values. Passion and integrity are mine. You guys have to think, what are your values? These values are foundational values of your leadership. And what's important is, when you actually get into an organization, these are the values which you cannot just hold it as your core. You will have to transmit it to your team. You will have to walk the talk on all these values. And that's going to be very, very important. Why? Because in organizations, there is a trust deficit. You know what a trust deficit is? You trust me, I don't trust me. You trust me a little, but I don't trust me so much. So that trust deficit, if it has to be bridged, people have to see that you are actually walking the talk on your personal values. And that's my first lesson to you. Build your personal values. Do not forget who you are, where you come from. And when you build these personal values, walk the talk. My second lesson is about, how many of you know what a VUCA world is? So somebody is going to tell.
I don't remember the entire acronym, but I know it means how our world is dynamic, ever-changing, and unstable at once.
Excellent. VUCA is essentially, it's a volatile world today. It's ambiguous, it's challenging. What's important in this world as a lesson is that you need to be courageous and you need to have resilience. I'm going to tell you my own story. Before I worked for Coca-Cola, I used to work for an organization called Nestle. I still remember the date. It was June 7, 2015. And I was having a dinner with my kids. And some of you here know my kids, I guess. And my daughter asked me, what we're eating here today for dinner, some of my friends say is poison. Can you guys guess the brand?
Maggie.
Yeah, it was one of the most favorite food brands of the country, Maggie. And it got banned. It was banned not just to sell the product, but also all the products which went into the market was supposed to be taken back. 20,000 tons of that product was actually taken back. And it was burnt. On one side, the environment was completely against us. We had to take back the products. The product was banned. People used to make phone calls to say, I have a 5 rupee Maggie. Can you come and take it back from my house? It was trials, tribulations. We had to actually fight a court case in order to get Maggie back. So this was happening on one side. On the other side, my team was glued to social media, like some of you guys are at this point of time. They were glued to social media. Why? Because they were listening to conversations by the consumers. And when they were listening to these conversations, they understood that there was a set of people who actually were expressing their love for Maggie. They were saying that we miss you, Maggie. So there was a different kind of unrest as well. So there were people who actually loved and missed Maggie on one side. On the other side, there were angry consumers and the environment was very, very difficult and ambiguous. But this set of consumers, who were the loyal ones, gave us an opportunity. But the opportunity to engage with them was fraught with risks. Because if you go and engage with the consumers, when the product has been banned, you may actually get into a lot of trouble. People may think you are arrogant as an organization. It may be misleading. It could actually backfire completely. It could have a negative snowball effect. But on the other hand, if you're going to go and actually engage with the consumers, you can keep this brand alive in consumers' mind and also not let the competition and other categories take undue advantage of your absence. You understand the picture? It was a very difficult time. We actually, together with the team, made a decision to go and engage with the consumers. We launched a set of 6 films. It was a campaign which was called Maggie Says We Miss You Too. Since the consumers were all saying we miss you, Maggie, we said Maggie also says we miss you too. It was a set of 6 films which ran only on digital and Facebook and other social media platforms, and it had an extraordinary positive and snowball effect. The conversations actually changed from ban and poison to suddenly love and missing. It was an example for us to say that when leadership can actually be courageous during an ambiguous environment, it can set the tone for the whole organization to actually act in a very different way. The organization actually became much more confident, and we got back Maggie, and the rest is history. The other, how many of you have heard of this Fukushima Daiichi disaster in 2011 in Japan? You have heard of everything. It's very good. Oh, okay. So you guys all know about it. Biggest natural disaster in the world. 9.0 earthquake, tsunami of equal size, 13,000 people dead, nuclear plant disaster. Think about it. Supply chain completely off, no energy, no power source that point of time. And Japan was going through an economic crisis. What was the economic crisis? The debt to GDP ratio was 200%. The World Bank came in and said, the natural disaster of Japan is worth 235 billion US dollars, which is possibly the GDP of most of the countries. This was the scale and scope of that disaster which had happened. Ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, can you imagine the plight of a nation? We are talking about brands and organizations, the plight of a nation which had such a huge natural disaster. Nobody would bet that Japan is going to bounce back. It was written off. Economic crisis, natural disaster, big debt. This is not going to come back. You guys know what happened? It was one of the fastest growing economies after that. Why? That's because the leaders of the government, leaders of businesses, and the citizens of the country all came together. They all came together to say there are individual interests, but there are also common areas of interest. And they put all that together in order to make sure that they are able to get that country back. What they showed was resilience. Courage and resilience are the most important factors when it comes to a very ambiguous and challenging environment. There is a very famous saying when it comes to leadership, actually success is not final and failure is not fatal. Courage and resilience to keep it going is what matters most. I'm just twisting the words of Winston Churchill, but that's what it is. The second lesson, the world is going to be more and more ambiguous, it's going to be more and more challenging. And what is going to matter most is the courage and resilience that as individuals and people with common interests, you people are going to show. And that's my second lesson. My third lesson is about greater good. Leadership is not about selfish interests. Leadership is about thinking about the greater good. My mom says when I was a little boy, I never used to finish a meal without listening to a story. My grandmom was a prolific storyteller. And every story she said, she would actually have a moral or a value embedded in it. I'm going to narrate one of the stories because I think it is relevant for this topic. She used to tell me the story of a king, a very brave king. And this king was actually going on a trek in a deserted mountain. It was a desert. He had run out of water supply. And if he did not have water immediately, he's going to die. He saw an abandoned cabin and he was extremely hopeful that he's going to find water there. So he trekked a bit, fell, but somehow did not give up, but went on to that abandoned cabin. And he saw a pump there. A water pump. You guys have heard of a water pump? You actually go like this to get the water out. That water pump gave him more hope. So he ran towards the water pump and started pumping. But nothing came out. On the other side, he saw a small note. It said, "Dear stranger, I have hidden a bottle of water underneath. Please do not drink that water. Take that bottle out and put it inside the pump to prime it up. When you prime that pump, the pump will give you a lot more water. So you can drink the water which comes out of the pump and also leave a bit for the next stranger to come back." What do you think the king did? Come on, a little more louder. Drank the water from the bottle, or did he take the water and put it inside the pump to make sure that he gets more water and he leaves the same note for the person and the stranger who is going to come back? My grandmom never wanted an answer from us. She used to give us a cold stare. We used to be scared to say we would drink the water. The moral was embedded. Leadership motivation cannot be selfish. Leadership motivation has to excel, not just for yourself. Leadership motivation has to be excelling for others, your family, your people around you, your teams, the larger organization. And that's a very key leadership motivation. Why? Because in the 21st century, there are a lot of other questions which are getting asked. What are those questions? You're talking about inclusion, diversity, fairness, waste, talking about water. You're talking about role of automation, digital and social media, very different issues which were actually absent before. So it is key to actually think about leadership in such a way that it is not restricted only to your selfish interests and the organization's interests. That is why today's businesses are called social enterprises, because the organization is not going to be judged on how it performs in the stock market. Not only by that, it's also going to be evaluated on what it does to the communities that it serves, to the people who work for, and also to the environment at large. So leaders who are actually going to be running a tight ship with just financial numbers of revenue and profit are going to be considered very, very narrow. And they are not going to be considered broad-based in terms of the environment and the institution that they want to build. So this lesson is actually about for the greater good. And I'm extremely proud to be a part of Coca-Cola. And what you saw there, our global CEO went on record to say that 100% equivalent of the packaging material that we will produce and sell, we will collect and recycle by 2030. What an inspiring one. By we operate in 208 countries. Come on, that deserves a big round of applause. 208 countries, Coca-Cola. And by 2030, 100% equivalent is going to be either collected or recycled. Think about what we are doing in India, about fruit circular economy, which Ishtiaq actually talked about. It's about procurement of fruits from the Indian farmer. India is a big agricultural economy. Procuring fruits from the farmers and then ensuring that the supply chain is tight. We are making an investment of 11,000 crores in India in the next 5 years. 5,500 crores on procurement and 5,800 crores on supply chain. So it's a holistic view of trying to say that we will procure fruits from India, actually produce and manufacture and sell it back. Leadership today cannot be restricted just to financial numbers. It needs to think about the communities that you serve, the customers that you serve, the consumers, the people whom they work for, and also making sure that the environment in the world is protected. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this is my third lesson. First one was about personal values. The second one was about resilience and courage in times of ambiguous environments. And the third one is leadership is not about selfish interests. You need to actually lead with purpose and for the greater good. This is what I have. And before I am going to close, I'm going to tell you guys a piece of advice. When it comes to leadership, be authentic. Be yourself. And everything will be all right. Thank you.